everything is painted, ready to go back onto the motor. Valve cover's looking awesome. You guys will see the color at the end of the video. For now, we have to build ourselves a motor. As you can tell, we got everything set up here. We got our 4G63 that has the incorrect pistons in it, and possibly other incorrect things. We've got all the new parts, the new machined head, upgraded valve springs, upgraded cams, head gasket, brand new timing cover, a bunch of brand new parts, our correct pistons right here. No more doing this half-assed. This 4G, all said and done, should be capable of, you know, maybe 700 horsepower. Like, this thing's gonna be a beast. Also have all of our gaskets, and then over here we have all of our tools, proper assembly lube, ring compressors, lots of plastic gauge. Then we have some specs and whatnot. What we have to do, we have to take this thing apart, take all the pistons, rods out. We then have to measure all the bottom end clearances. So, you know, main bearing clearances with a crank, rod bearing clearances with a crank, just because I don't trust that the person who built this measured those properly, because he put the wrong pistons in. So what else did you do wrong, you know? Then we have to put the new pistons in. In order to do that, we have to file down the new rings to the proper ring gap, and then put it all back together. And then put our heads in, and then all the other small stuff. By the end of this video, we're gonna have a fully assembled, ready to bolt in, very pretty looking 4G63. Without any further ado, let's take the oil pan off this thing and start pulling the pistons and the rods. Got all the old rods and pistons out, and got the pistons separated from the rods. Now we're not gonna reuse the wrist pins or the clips or any of the piston stuff, but I just wanted to organize it. If I've learned anything about rebuilding motors, everything, just put it back the way it came out. Keep everything organized. So I actually have a full factory service manual for the 4G engine. It lists the procedures of rebuilding the motor and all of the clearances that you need to measure. So for instance, for the crankshaft, it needs to be within 0.02 to 0.05 millimeters of bearing clearance. So we're just gonna go ahead and follow these instructions like our life depends on it, and measure the crank bearing clearances first. I didn't check what the proper clearances were before buying plastic gauge, so I just bought every single type of plastic gauge. Each one is a different size and covers different ranges of clearance. The one we want is the smallest one, which is the green one, which covers 0.025 millimeter to 0.076 millimeter. So we put plastic gauge in each of the bearings, torqued it down, and what that did is it squishes the plastic gauge to a certain width. Now we'll remove all the bearing caps again, and then we can actually measure the width of the plastic gauge to know how much clearance there is. So when it squishes down, it imprints on both the bearing and the actual crank, so we'll measure both. To clarify, we want it between 0.02 and 0.05. So it should be somewhere in between there, and I can already tell that it's not. This is essentially maxed out at 0.07. Like, even the biggest setting is, I mean, it's about right. So, I mean, let's keep measuring, but it seems like our crank isn't even in spec. So it's not looking super great. The back two, pretty much good. They were pretty much in spec. The rest of them were slightly out of spec, but the problem is that that plastic gauge we used was the smallest size, and it was kind of out of its limit. So we're gonna redo it with the next size up plastic gauge to get a more accurate reading and go from there. After measuring all of the main bearing clearances again, so here's the thing. They're all out of ideal spec, but they are all within the limit. Now I spoke to the guy who built the motor, and he used bearings with an extra thousandths of an inch of oil clearance. That's kind of a typical thing people will do sometimes on really high horsepower builds. The thing about this build and these numbers, they're a little bit, the clearances are too big. If this thing was like a 1,000 horsepower drag build, this would probably be fine, you know, run a heavyweight oil. But the fact that this is a street car, we gotta get new main bearings. We gotta get the standard size main bearings, which is unfortunate. It means we're gonna take the oil pump off, the rear thing off, get new seals, more money, more bearings. But I'm glad we measured it. I'm glad we're gonna get these numbers into spec. So now we're gonna go ahead and check the rod bearings. Probably gonna be a similar thing because he also used oversized bearings on those. Two of the rod bearings were in spec, two of them were slightly out of spec. Yet again, it's just gonna be smarter to go back down to the standard size bearings. This is why you measure things and don't just assume that they're good, like someone who I think did.
Why are you looking at me?
I don't know, I'm not insinuating you did it.
You're like someone.
Daniel was actually the guy who built this,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
everyone say, Daniel.
Yeah, it was me.
Before I just jump into measuring and stuff with the new rings, I'm gonna practice on these old rings. Top ring. I believe you kind of put it in there, and then to get it straight.
Holy.
Hey, yo. To get it straight, it doesn't really work when you're not using the right size pistons, but if you're using the right size pistons, then it will perfectly fit in the bore. So that's straight-ish. Homie definitely did not measure ring gap. Before we start filing the rings and measuring ring gap and all that, we need to make sure that the cylinders are circular and that they're the right size. So I got our bore gauge. We're going to measure a couple different points to make sure it's all the same. So we got all of our cylinder bore sizes. Now we have to measure each piston and then just do some subtraction. We found a little surprise in the cylinders. So going to cylinder 4, I'm gonna measure it down the length of the block here. Bore gauge is zeroed out. As you can tell, it is 15 thou or 1.5 thou, I think. A good bit smaller than the bore is supposed to be. So it's like undersized that way. Rotate the bore gauge 90 degrees, and now over or just at the size of the bore. So that last cylinder is not a circle anymore. And pistons, unfortunately, are circles, not ovals. So the block is bad. So this video went about as poorly as it could have gone. The first 3 cylinders were fine. They were more or less circular. And then off camera, I went ahead and measured all the pistons. Not like it really matters anyway, because cylinder 4 is worthless, but even though the first 3 cylinders were round, they still just weren't unanimous enough. In some spots, the piston to wall clearances would have been too tight. Some spots, they would have been too loose. This motor would have never lasted. So, the question's now what? Hi, yeah, I've got a 4-cylinder engine block that I need bored, honed, and then have decked. I was just wondering what kind of timeline would you be able to do for that?
Well, we got vacation next week, you know, they're gonna be here, and I can't do it this week, so you gotta have it for 2 weeks.
But, so you could get it done in like, 3 weeks essentially?
Something like that.
Alright, thanks. Bye-bye. Well, that's actually not as terrible as I was expecting. Man needs a new phone though. I think it was,
Yeah.
the audio quality was not there.
Yeah, it's like using a wind tunnel.
Yeah. So there's really only 2 options. Option 1 would be to throw this block away, then get a new block and have that bored out to the size of these pistons. Problem about that is that you gotta find a new block. These blocks aren't super common. Unfortunately, I gave away my other 2 blocks to the guy who built the motor. So I would have had a block that I could use for this, but nope, now I don't. That sucks. Option 2 is to return these pistons, get the next size up, that would be an 86mm piston, and then bore this thing over another 0.5 millimeter. Now, if we were going for like 1,000 horsepower, boring it over again probably wouldn't be ideal, but I was doing research, plenty of people run 1mm over stock and have no issues whatsoever with high boost, so we're probably gonna go with that option, as long as I can get 86mm pistons somewhat quickly. But either way, Eclipse ain't gonna be finished anytime soon because I'm sick and tired of this BS of buying used motors or having some person say they're gonna build you one legitly and then being screwed over. I think I've learned the only way to do it right is to do it yourself. We're gonna get it machined, we're gonna assemble it now with the new bearings, the new pistons, whatever happens. But as you heard from the machine shop, it's gonna be at least probably a month. But I'm assuming whoever wins this thing probably wants it to come with a motor, so hopefully they will be patient. Because if they want it now, they can have it. I'll give it to them. They can have it if they want it as is. We're not gonna do anything else with the Eclipse until we have a motor, and the next video you see with the Eclipse, it's gonna be running and driving. Only reason why I'm making this video and posting it is because you guys need to know that this thing's not gonna be done soon, so I don't get a bunch of questions. But just know the next video you see of the Eclipse, it's running and driving. In the meantime, we've got some goodies for like the fit. The Delica is going to return and we are going to finish that. And then we have some other projects coming, including an LS for a certain Volvo. So it is what it is. At least we have other things to do. I was just thinking about this. It's funny. I was talking shit about the first owner, whoever rebuilt the motor that came with the car. I was talking shit on them because it was pretty much destroyed. You know, had a couple spun bearings. It was gonna blow itself up pretty soon. But really, compared to this engine build, that guy was a genius. I mean, it actually ran. This thing would have never ran for more than a mile. It really sucks because I think a lot of people who probably aren't watching the videos and are just like looking at the titles of the videos are gonna think I'm being some idiot and I don't know how to build motors or something like that. Whereas this entire situation has been totally out of my control. If any of you have started doubting me about my ability to get cars running quickly, just know I've learned from this experience. Never again am I doing this, building it myself from now on, because man, there's just nothing more demotivating than trying to finish a project and then the same freaking issue coming up over and over again in different ways. So apologies, but I mean, that's gonna be it for this video. There's nothing much else to do. Really, there is some progress we can make on the Eclipse until the motor's done, but I don't feel like working on it anymore. Let's do some of these other projects, have some fun with them, and then we'll get back to this one. Don't worry, the giveaway is not going anywhere. It's not like we're abandoning this project. We're just focusing on this other stuff for now. But thanks for watching, I guess. Thankfully, I will say, the guy who built this refunded me totally. So, you know, if he had done this on purpose, or if he had a shitty shop that was purposely screwing over customers, he wouldn't have refunded me the money. I've worked with companies that suck before. They don't admit that they did anything wrong, and they don't refund you, and they don't do anything to make it right. This guy at least made it right. So that's why I'm not putting him in blast or anything. But yeah, that's it. Peace out, guys. But there is one last thing. At the beginning of this video, I said I was going to show you the color of the valve cover. Now, I really wanted that to be on a finished, beautiful 4G63, but fate has not allowed that. So here we are. A wrinkle red valve cover. This bad boy is gonna look like a Ferrari.
How it goes psh, psh.
It sounds crazy.
Yeah, that sounded actually really
It
good.
goes hard, dude.
It goes real hard. I'm just gonna keep listening, man.